Imagine a place where the ocean moves more water in 6 hours than the Amazon, Nile, and Mississippi combined discharge in a day, where you can walk on the Atlantic seabed and watch it vanish beneath 50 feet of water before dinner. Nova Scotia is not just a province, it is a geological war zone where the highest tides on Earth carve caves through solid cliffs. What you are about to discover are 50 facts so bizarre, so impossibly extreme that they sound like fiction, yet every single one is measured, documented, and happening right now. Let's start. Part 1. Tides that swallow forests and bays that breathe backwards. 1. The Bay of Fundy experiences tidal ranges up to 16.3 meters, 53 feet of vertical change, moving 160 billion tons of water twice daily, more than all the world's freshwater rivers combined, reshaping the coastline every 12 hours. This is not merely a tide, this is a geological heartbeat, the ocean breathing in and out with such force that it moves more water in 6 hours than the Amazon, the Nile, and the Mississippi combined discharge in a day. Stand on the shore and you can watch the sea advance, hear it coming, see the waterline climb rock faces in real time as the Atlantic reclaims what it temporarily surrendered. By the way, do you think you know Canada? Subscribe to discover the hidden stories behind every province, territory, and landscape that make this country unlike anywhere else on Earth. However, the true absurdity reveals itself when you can walk on the ocean floor. 2. Hopewell Rock's flower pot formations stand 15 meters tall at low tide, but at high tide they become tiny islands. The seafloor becomes a hiking trail, then drowns under 12 meters of water in 6 hours. Walk among these stone towers at low tide and you are walking on the bottom of the Bay of Fundy, on ground that is normally underwater, on a landscape that exists only on a schedule dictated by the moon. Return 6 hours later and you would drown where you stood, the flower pots reduced to stumps jutting from a violent sea. Meanwhile, rivers themselves surrender to this tidal tyranny. 3. The Shubenacadie River's tidal bore races upstream at 13 kilometers per hour, a visible wave that surfers ride inland. The Atlantic climbing rivers backward, rewriting flow direction twice daily. This is not flooding. This is the ocean invading fresh water, a standing wave of salt water that travels upriver like a liquid bulldozer, pushing fish, debris, and kayakers ahead of it. Surfers wait on riverbanks for the bore to arrive, then ride it inland for kilometers, surfing a wave that has no beach, only more river. But the most surprising thing is the island that refuses to stay in one place. 4. Sable Island sits 300 kilometers offshore, a 42-kilometer crescent of sand migrating eastward 200 meters per year, a shape-shifting graveyard of over 350 shipwrecks, home to 500 wild horses and nothing else. This is not an island, this is a sandbar pretending to be land. A geological mirage that moves, changes shape, appears on maps in different locations across centuries. The horses, descendants of shipwreck survivors and colonial livestock, are the only permanent residents, living on an island that is slowly walking away from Nova Scotia into the open Atlantic. Even so, not all of Nova Scotia's defenses needed to prove themselves. 5. Halifax's citadel was designed to be impregnable and never saw battle, a star-shaped stronghold that spent 200 years waiting for an attack that never came, now defended only by tourists. This is a fortress that succeeded by reputation alone, a military installation so intimidating that enemies chose to fight elsewhere. Walk its ramparts and you are walking a monument to deterrence, a fort that won every battle by never having to fight. As a consequence of this maritime vulnerability, tragedy struck from an unexpected direction. 6. The 1917 Halifax explosion, the largest pre-nuclear man-made blast, flattened 2.5 square kilometers of the city when a munition ship collided. 2,000 dead, shock wave felt 400 kilometers away, creating the blueprint for disaster response worldwide. The SS Mont Blanc, loaded with wartime explosives, collided with another vessel in the harbor and detonated with the force of 3 kilotons of TNT. The explosion was so massive it created a tsunami, vaporized the ship entirely, and sent a shock wave that shattered windows 100 kilometers away. The city burned, and snow that fell the next day turned to slush in the fires. This disaster became the template, the first coordinated disaster relief effort, the first triage systems, the first modern emergency response protocols that we still use today. On the other hand, Nova Scotia's connection to the mainland is more fragile than most realize. 7. The Chignecto Isthmus, just 24 kilometers wide, is all that connects Nova Scotia to mainland Canada, a geological bottleneck where the province nearly became an island. This narrow neck of land is all that prevents Nova Scotia from drifting away, a thin strip where the Bay of Fundy almost meets the Northumberland Strait, where two bodies of water nearly merge and turn a peninsula into an island. Engineers have proposed canals here for centuries, and climate change now threatens to breach it naturally through erosion and storm surge. What many did not see coming is what lies beneath the waves offshore. 8. The Gully, North America's largest submarine canyon, plunges 2,500 meters offshore, deeper than the Grand Canyon, home to endangered beaked whales, cold seeps, and ecosystems never touched by light. This is an underwater chasm carved into the continental shelf, a canyon so deep that its bottom exists in pressures and darkness that crush and blind. Beaked whales, species so rare that scientists know them mainly from carcasses, hunt in these depths, diving to crushing depths where no light penetrates, navigating by echolocation through an abyss just kilometers from Nova Scotia's fishing grounds. Meanwhile, the land itself remembers ancient forces. 9. Halifax sits on a glacially sculpted landscape of drumlins, elongated hills all pointing southeast, mapped proof of ice sheet direction 12,000 years ago, now streets and suburbs built on fossil flow lines. These are not natural hills. These are the fingerprints of ice 2 kilometers thick, glaciers that shaped the land like clay, pushing sediment into 600 whale-shaped mounds that all point the same direction, showing precisely which way the ice moved. Drive through Halifax and you are driving over a landscape sculpted by ice that melted before civilization began. However, Nova Scotia's position was once unimaginably different. 10. 200 million years ago, the Atlantic didn't exist. Nova Scotia sat against Morocco until Pangaea rifted, creating an ocean from a crack, turning an inland region into a maritime peninsula. Stand on the shore and you are standing on what was once the center of a supercontinent, on rock that touched Africa, on a coastline that formed when continents divorced. The Atlantic Ocean is a wound, a spreading scar where the Earth split itself open, and Nova Scotia sits on the edge of that wound, watching it widen millimeter by millimeter each year. But the most surprising thing is what the stone itself can do. 11. Joggin's fossil cliffs hold 310 million-year-old coal age forests, upright fossilized trees, trackways of earliest reptiles, and minerals that fluoresce under UV light, illuminating deep time. Walk these cliffs and you are walking through fossilized forests. Trees that died and were buried so quickly they remained standing now turn to stone in their death positions. Shine ultraviolet light on certain fossils and they glow, minerals that fluoresce, turning the cliffs into a light show from the Carboniferous, ancient chemistry visible only in wavelengths our eyes cannot normally see. Even so, humanity has tried to harness this tidal power. 12. The Annapolis Royal Tidal Station was North America's only tidal power plant, harnessing Fundy's tides to generate electricity from the moon's gravitational pull. This is not hydroelectric power. This is lunar power, electricity generated by the moon's gravity pulling the ocean across turbines, extracting energy from celestial mechanics. The plant operated for decades, a proof of concept that the tide, reliable, predictable, unstoppable, could power human civilization. As a consequence of this maritime position, one harbor defies winter itself. 13. Halifax Harbor remains ice-free year-round despite brutal winters. Warm Gulf Stream currents and deep water keep Canada's Atlantic Gateway open when St. Lawrence ports lock solid. This is why Halifax became Canada's ocean heart, why the Navy base is here, why Atlantic convoys gathered in these waters during both World Wars. While ice chokes the St. Lawrence and closes Montreal for months, Halifax stays liquid, a port that never sleeps, never freezes, never closes, the only Atlantic gateway that winter cannot lock. Part 2. Forest that drowned, gold that cursed, and stone that remembers fire. 14. Lake Brasdoor's submerged forest died when post-glacial rebound reversed. Trees drowned in place 4,000 years ago, now skeletal underwater groves haunting the lakebed. These forests grew when the land was higher, when glacial rebound lifted the shoreline above sea level. Then, as isostatic adjustment reversed and the land sank again, the ocean invaded through narrow channels and salt water flooded the forests faster than trees could retreat. They died standing, and now divers swim through underwater forests past drowned tree trunks that have been submerged for millennia, ghostly wood that fish navigate like reef. However, some of Nova Scotia's geology is almost pure mineral. 15. Cape Breton's gypsum deposits are so vast they're mined and shipped globally. 300-million-year-old evaporite beds where ancient seas dried into mountains of white stone. This is the residue of oceans that evaporated, leaving behind concentrated minerals in layers hundreds of meters thick. Entire mountains are made of gypsum, stone so soft you can scratch it with your fingernail, quarried and shipped worldwide for drywall, plaster, and cement. Nova Scotia exporting ancient seabeds to build modern walls. Meanwhile, wealth still hides in the stone. 16. Nova Scotia has over 60 historic gold districts still producing. Maguma Terrane's 400-million-year-old metamorphic rocks trap veins of gold that miners chase through quartz like frozen lightning. The gold rush here never truly ended. Mines that opened in the 1860s still operate, following quartz veins that branch and twist through bedrock like fossilized lightning bolts. Each vein deposited when hydrothermal fluids forced gold into cracks under immense pressure. This is not gold that washed downstream into placers. This is primary gold, still locked in the rock where it crystallized, wealth that requires dynamite and determination to extract. But the most surprising thing is how quickly the coast erases itself. 17. The Fundy Shore erodes 30+ centimeters per year in places. Cliffs crumble, forests fall into the sea, fossils tumble onto beaches before the next tide reclaims them. Coastline retreating inland visibly within lifetimes. Stand at a cliff edge marked on a map from 50 years ago and you are standing on air. The land has retreated, the cliff face collapsed, the forest fallen. Fossils weather out of the cliffs and tumble onto the beach, where collectors have hours to find them before the tide returns and buries or destroys them. This is a race between erosion revealing ancient life and tides destroying it. Even so, not all lakes in Nova Scotia are actually lakes. 18. Lake Brasdoor is technically an inland sea. Saltwater, tides, marine ecosystems connected to the Atlantic by narrow channels, a 1,100 square kilometer ocean trapped inside an island. This is not a lake that happens to be salty. This is the Atlantic extending inland through narrow straits, creating an inland ocean where seals, jellyfish, and saltwater fish live in what maps call a lake. The water rises and falls with the tides, and sailors navigate it with marine charts, not lake maps. As a consequence of this volcanic past, some stone remembers fire. 19. Cape Dore is a basalt plug from 200-million-year-old Triassic eruptions. Frozen magma that once fed lava flows, now crowned with a lighthouse guiding ships past its ancient fire. This is the throat of a volcano, the magma conduit that solidified when eruptions ceased.
harder than the surrounding rock, so it remains while everything around it eroded away. Stand on Cape D'Or and you are standing on the inside of a volcano, on frozen magma that never reached the surface, on stone that was liquid when dinosaurs were young. On the other hand, some fires never stopped burning. 20. Stellarton's coal seams caught fire in the 1800s and smoldered for decades. Underground infernos that melted surface roads, toxic smoke venting from cracks, subterranean hellfire beneath homes. Coal exposed to air self-ignites, and once burning underground, it is nearly impossible to extinguish without flooding entire mine networks. Residents walked streets where smoke vented from cracks in the pavement, where the ground was hot to the touch, where an invisible fire burned beneath their feet for generations. Some of these fires were never fully extinguished. They simply burned through accessible coal and retreated deeper into seams no one can reach. What many did not see coming is that Nova Scotia has a true fjord. 21. St. Anne's Bay is Nova Scotia's only true fjord. Glacially carved, steep-walled, over 100 meters deep, a drowned ice valley where whales swim past Celtic fiddlers. This is not a river valley that flooded. This is a U-shaped trench excavated by glaciers, carved by ice moving downhill toward the sea, then flooded when the ice melted and the ocean invaded. The walls drop almost vertically, into water deep enough for whales, while on shore, Cape Breton's Gaelic culture plays fiddle tunes in a landscape that could pass for Norway. Meanwhile, life itself began experimenting here. 22. Mistaken point-style Ediacaran organisms found in Cape Breton predate skeletons. 575-million-year-old impressions of life's first experiments with complexity. Alien forms that predate all modern body plans. These are not fossils of anything alive today. These are impressions of organisms so ancient and so strange that scientists debate whether they were animals, plants, fungi, or something else entirely. Fractals made of flesh, symmetries that evolution abandoned, body plans that led nowhere but briefly dominated the seafloor before the Cambrian explosion erased them. However, some rocks traveled impossibly far. 23. Glacial erratics of granite sit on limestone bedrock. Rocks from the Canadian Shield rafted south on glaciers, dropped when ice melted, geological tourists that will never return home. These boulders have no business being here. The granite comes from hundreds of kilometers north, carried by ice and deposited on limestone that formed from tropical reefs. They are strangers in a strange land, refugees from the Shield sitting on stone that remembers when Nova Scotia was at the equator. But the most surprising thing is that some beaches make music. 24. Basin Head's singing sands squeak underfoot. Pure quartz grains of perfect roundness and size friction against each other, creating acoustic resonance found in only a handful of beaches worldwide. Walk this beach and every step produces a squeak, a chirp, a sound like rubber on glass. The sand grains must be perfectly round, perfectly clean, and within a narrow size range, conditions so specific that only a few beaches on Earth can sing. The sound comes from grains vibrating at their resonant frequency when compressed by footsteps, turning the beach into an instrument played by walking. If these facts are surprising you, hit that like button and subscribe. There are dozens more Canadian mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Even so, geography can fold in on itself. 25. Cape Breton is a peninsula. Within it, Bras d'Or divides it. Within that, smaller peninsulas jut. Fractal geography of land jutting into water jutting into land. Stand on a small peninsula within Cape Breton and you are on land jutting into water that is itself surrounded by land that is a peninsula jutting into the Atlantic. A geological nesting doll of coastline. As a consequence of this tidal force, caves form differently here. 26. Sea caves along the Fundy coast are hollowed by tidal force. 50-plus meter caverns excavated by water pressure, collapse, and 10,000 years of the highest tides on Earth hammering stone. These caves were not carved by rivers or waves. They were hollowed by tidal hydraulics, water forced into cracks under immense pressure twice daily, freeze-thaw cycles, and the sheer kinetic energy of 16-meter tides. Some caves penetrate so far inland that you can hear the ocean roaring inside the cliff, a subterranean tide pounding stone and darkness.
Part 3. Islands that migrate, ships that vanish, and light that bends time. 27. Meat Cove, Cape Breton's northernmost village, faces Arctic pack ice driven south by winds. Icebergs, floes, and frozen ocean blockading roads, trapping residents for weeks. This is not typical Nova Scotia winter. This is ice from the Arctic driven south by storms, packing against the coast and locking the village in frozen siege. Residents watch icebergs ground themselves offshore, see pack ice seal the coastline, and wait for spring thaw to restore access to the outside world. This is Atlantic Canada living under Arctic conditions. A village at the same latitude as northern France, but experiencing winters that belong 1,000 kilometers north. However, the true danger has always been offshore. 28. Over 5,000 shipwrecks litter Nova Scotia's coast. Sable Island alone claimed 350 ships, foggy shores and hidden shows creating maritime carnage that funded salvage empires. This is the graveyard of the Atlantic, a coastline so treacherous that for centuries it was considered suicidal to sail these waters at night or in fog. Shifting sandbars, hidden rocks, sudden storms, and persistent fog turned these waters into a maritime abattoir. Salvagers made fortunes recovering cargo from wrecks, and coastal communities depended economically on ships breaking apart on their shores. A grim economy built on maritime disaster. Meanwhile, one lighthouse predates the nation itself. 29. Sambro Island Light, built in 1758, is the oldest operating lighthouse in the Americas. Predating Confederation by 109 years, guiding ships before Nova Scotia was even British. This lighthouse was already ancient when Canada became a country. It guided ships during the 7 Years' War, during the American Revolution, during the War of 1812, during both World Wars. A stone tower that has warned ships away from rocks for over 2.5 centuries. Older than the United States, older than the concept of Canada. But the most surprising thing is how many vessels simply vanished. 30. The Bermuda Triangle's northern cousin. Dozens of ships and aircraft vanished off Nova Scotia's coast, including echoes of Flight 19's mystery, Halifax's own disappearances lost to fog, current, and deep water. This is a disappearance zone that lacks the Bermuda Triangle's fame but matches its body count. Ships radio distress and are never seen again. Aircraft disappear from radar. Search parties find nothing. No debris, no bodies, no wreckage. Just empty ocean and questions. The deep offshore trenches, the fog, the violent storms, the cold water that sinks bodies instead of floating them, all conspire to erase evidence and leave only absence. Even so, some lakes defy measurement. 31. Legend claims Loch Lomond in Cape Breton is bottomless. Sonar found depths over 100 meters in places, but peat-stained water blocks light, creating an abyss that feels infinite. The lake is so dark, so deep, and so mysterious that traditional depth measurements failed, and locals insisted it had no bottom. Modern sonar proved it has a floor, but the water is stained so dark by tannins that even at shallow depths you cannot see down, cannot bottom, cannot judge depth. A lake that feels bottomless even when you know it is not. As a consequence of this maritime climate, fog becomes a permanent resident. 32. Southwestern Nova Scotia averages 122 fog days annually, more than San Francisco. Persistent Gulf Stream Labrador Current collision creates walls of mist that swallow islands for days. This is not morning fog that burns off by noon. This is maritime fog that settles for days. Fog so thick you cannot see your hand at arm's length. Fog that turns midday into guesswork.
The warm Gulf Stream meets cold Labrador Current offshore, and where they collide, the air cannot hold its moisture. Water vapor condenses into fog banks that roll onshore and refuse to leave. On the other hand, some coastal phenomena are bioluminescent. 33. Bioluminescent dinoflagellates light Nova Scotia bays in summer. Paddle through water and it explodes in blue-green fire, living light from single-celled organisms disturbed by motion. Dip your hand in the water and watch it drip liquid light. Kayak at night and every paddle stroke ignites the water around you. Trails of glowing blue following your hull, fish leaving comet tails as they flee, the entire bay flickering with living fire. These dinoflagellates produce light when disturbed. A chemical reaction that evolved as a defense mechanism now creates one of nature's most surreal displays. What many did not see coming is that winter can build bridges. 34. In extreme winters, sea ice forms a path to coastal islands. Temporary roads walked by moose, deer, and desperate islanders when ferries can't run. The ocean freezes solid enough to walk on, and suddenly islands are no longer isolated. They connect to the mainland via ice, and residents cross on foot or snowmobile, racing against spring thaw. Moose use these ice bridges to colonize islands they could never reach by swimming. And when spring comes and the ice melts, island moose populations find themselves stranded on land they can no longer leave. Meanwhile, some mines dug beneath impossible places. 35. Coal mines beneath the Atlantic extend 5+ kilometers offshore under the seafloor. Miners worked under the ocean, hearing waves above, extracting coal from beneath submarine bedrock. Descend into these mines and you are walking under the Atlantic, under the weight of the ocean, tunneling through coal seams that extend from land out under the sea. Miners could hear the ocean above them, waves pounding, storms raging, and they dug coal from beneath the seafloor. A claustrophobic nightmare where ceiling collapse means instant drowning. Some of these mines flooded catastrophically, and their tunnels remained full of seawater, subterranean extensions of the Atlantic itself. However, some harbors are secrets. 36. Terrence Bay's entrance is barely boat width. A hidden harbor protected by rock gates, invisible from sea, where privateers hid and modern yachts seek shelter. From offshore, this harbor is invisible, just unbroken coastline with no hint that a perfect natural harbor sits behind the rocks. Navigate the narrow entrance and you emerge in a protected basin large enough for dozens of vessels, completely hidden from the ocean. Privateers used it as a base for raiding, disappearing into what appeared to be solid coastline, and modern sailors prize it as one of the coast's best hidden anchorages. But the most surprising thing is how close Halifax came to not existing. 37. Chebacoot Peninsula holding Halifax nearly eroded away. Glacial scouring almost severed it, leaving a landscape of narrow necks and drowned valleys where land clings to existence. Glaciers carved so deeply into this peninsula that it almost became islands. Halifax sits on land that survived by meters, by the narrowest of margins, on a peninsula that glaciers tried to destroy and almost succeeded. The landscape is a maze of drowned valleys, fjord-like inlets where the ocean penetrates deep inland, narrow isthmuses that almost don't exist, land shaped by ice that wanted to cut it into pieces. Even so, one mystery has obsessed treasure hunters for centuries. 38. Oak Island's Money Pit, a 200-plus-year treasure hunt in a shaft that floods with seawater, booby-trapped with platforms every 3 meters, rumored to hold pirate gold, Templar treasure, or elaborate hoax, still unsolved. Dig down and you hit a platform of logs. Dig deeper, another platform. The pit floods with seawater from underground channels that seem deliberately engineered. Over 2 centuries, fortunes have been spent, lives have been lost, and nothing of value has been recovered. Is it treasure, a natural sinkhole, an elaborate prank that has consumed millions in excavation costs? The pit keeps its secrets, And each generation of treasure hunters believe they will be the ones to solve what all others failed to find. As a consequence of this isolation, culture froze in time. Cape Breton's Gaelic-speaking communities preserved Scottish culture frozen in the 1700s. Dialects, music, traditions extinct in Scotland survived here, a cultural time capsule on Atlantic shores. Scottish immigrants brought their language, their music, their stories, and then Cape Breton's isolation preserved them, while Scotland itself modernized and lost them. Linguists record Gaelic here that sounds like recordings from 300 years ago. Fiddle traditions that died in Scotland thrive in Cape Breton. Songs forgotten in the Highlands are sung nightly in Cape Breton kitchens. A cultural preservation through geographic isolation, where remoteness saved what modernity erased.
Part 4. Land still sinking, stone still burning, and memory written in tide. 40. Parts of Nova Scotia experience subsidence, post-glacial adjustment and isostatic depression causing coastal areas to drop, accelerating sea level rise beyond global averages. The land is sinking. Not metaphorically, not eventually, sinking now, measurably, year by year. While Quebec's north coast rises as it rebounds from glacial weight, Nova Scotia's coast sinks as the land adjusts to the redistribution of weight, the crust flexing like a seesaw. Tide gauges show sea level rising faster here than the global average, but it is not just the ocean rising, the land is falling to meet it. Coastal homes that were safe a generation ago now flood regularly, not because storms are worse, but because the ground beneath them has dropped. However, not all of Nova Scotia's seismic activity stays offshore. 41. The 1929 Grand Banks earthquake, magnitude 7.2, originated offshore, triggered underwater landslides, generated tsunamis that hit Newfoundland, killed 28, felt across Nova Scotia. This was not a minor tremor. This was a major quake that triggered submarine landslides massive enough to snap transatlantic telegraph cables in sequence as the slide propagated downslope. The resulting tsunami hit Newfoundland's Burren Peninsula with waves up to 13 meters high, washing away entire communities. Nova Scotia felt the quake strongly, and the event proved that Atlantic Canada sits on faults capable of major seismic events. This coast is not as geologically stable as people assume. Meanwhile, some rivers wear their chemistry openly. 42. La Have River runs root beer brown from tannins. Peat bogs and decaying vegetation stain it the color of cola. Clear water transformed into dark tea by forest chemistry. This is not pollution. This is the river extracting tannins from peat, from decaying leaves, from the organic acids produced by forests. The water looks like it should be undrinkable, toxic, contaminated, but it is clean, just heavily stained, dyed by the landscape it flows through. Hold a glass of this water up and it looks like iced tea, transparent but deeply colored, liquid infused with the chemistry of bogs and forests. But the most surprising thing is the valley carved by a ghost. 43. The Annapolis Valley was excavated by glacial meltwater torrents, catastrophic floods that no longer flow, leaving a fertile trough between mountains, ghost rivers written in topography. When glaciers melted, they released floods of biblical proportions, temporary rivers larger than any modern watercourse, carrying enough water and sediment to carve valleys in years. The Annapolis Valley is one such scar, carved by meltwater that flowed for centuries then stopped, leaving behind a wide, flat valley perfect for farming, excavated by rivers that no longer exist, geography shaped by water that has not flowed in 10,000 years. Even so, the land keeps perfect records. 44. Nova Scotia's bogs archive climate history. Cores reveal when pine replaced spruce, when Europeans arrived via ragweed pollen spike, when acid rain began via heavy metal signatures. Drill into a peat bog and you are drilling through time, through stacked layers where each centimeter represents years or decades. Scientists read these cores like books. Pollen reveals which trees grew when,
Charcoal layers mark forest fires, chemical signatures show volcanic eruptions and industrial pollution. Even ragweed pollen spikes mark European land clearing. These bogs remember 5,000 years of climate, vegetation, and human impact, preserved in compressed plant matter that never fully decomposed. As a consequence of this maritime position, even asteroid impacts hide offshore. 45. The Montanaz impact crater, 45 kilometers wide, sits 200 meters underwater off Sable Island. 50-million-year-old asteroid strike buried under sediment, invisible except to seismic surveys. This is a crater larger than any visible on land in eastern North America, punched into the seafloor by an asteroid during the Eocene, then buried by millions of years of sediment. You cannot see it from the surface, cannot visit it, can only detect it through seismic profiling that reveals the circular scar beneath the mud. A cosmic impact that killed everything for hundreds of kilometers, now completely hidden beneath the ocean. On the other hand, not all water fights in one direction. 46. Reversing falls near Yarmouth show many rapids that flip direction. Incoming tide creates upstream rapids, outgoing tide creates downstream rapids, water fighting itself twice daily. Stand on a bridge and watch the rapids flow one direction, return 6 hours later and they flow the opposite direction. Same location, opposite flow, water that cannot decide which way is downhill because the tide keeps redefining it. This is tidal force overcoming river current, the ocean powerful enough to reverse the flow of fresh water. Gravity itself negotiable, depending on what the moon is doing. What many did not see coming is that beaches can walk. 47. Martinique Beach's eastern spit migrates with longshore drift. Sand rivers flowing underwater, reshaping dunes, swallowing forests, exposing stumps, geography in fast forward. This beach is not static. It moves, migrates, walks eastward as waves transport sand grain by grain. The spit extends, grows, shifts, and in doing so swallows forests that grew too close to the shore. Walk the beach and you find drowned tree stumps in the surf zone, trees that grew on dry land now standing in salt water, killed by a beach that walked over them. This is erosion and deposition operating fast enough to see in a single lifetime. Meanwhile, some fires can never be extinguished. 48. Abandoned mines still smolder. Self-igniting coal seams that catch fire from spontaneous combustion, underground infernos that vent smoke through fissures, unextinguishable without flooding entire networks. Coal exposed to air oxidizes, heats up, and if conditions are right, ignites. Once burning underground, these fires are nearly impossible to stop. They burn through accessible coal, then retreat deeper into seams no one can reach, continuing to smolder for decades or centuries. Some of Nova Scotia's abandoned mines still vent smoke, still produce toxic gases, still burn. Fires started in the 1800s that will outlive everyone currently alive. However, not all roads sit on solid ground. 49. Sections of Highway 103 flout on muskeg. Roadbed sits atop peat bogs meters deep. Roadway literally floating on semi-liquid vegetation, requiring constant maintenance and weight distribution engineering. Drive this highway and you are driving on ground that is not ground, on pavement laid over peat that shifts, settles, and breathes. The road floats like a raft, and in places you can see it ripple, see pavement that undulates because the bog beneath it moves. This is engineering on impossible ground, infrastructure built on terrain that does not want to support it, roads that require constant repair because the foundation itself is alive and shifting. But the most surprising thing is what silence sounds like. 50. Dozens of Nova Scotia islands once inhabited now stand empty. Lighthouses automated, fishing villages evacuated, homes collapsing, forests reclaiming clearings, human absence echoing louder than presence. Walk these abandoned islands and you walk through ghost towns, where houses rot, where docks collapse into the sea, where the forest is swallowing roads. These islands were thriving communities, schools, churches, stores, and now they are empty, surrendered to the wind and the forest. The silence is not peaceful. It is oppressive, the acoustic void left when an entire community vanishes. This is demographic decline made visible, communities that could not survive isolation and remoteness, islands where the last resident left and locked the door behind them forever. Even so, the land itself speaks in indigenous languages. These are just 50 of thousands of incredible facts. Like this video and subscribe so you never miss the surprising truths hidden across Canada's geography.